He still does not know, Ryan whispered into the phone, and suddenly I understood that whatever secret he was keeping had something to do with me. It was 2:13 in the morning, 42 floors above downtown Chicago, and I was supposed to be asleep. Instead, I lay perfectly still on the leather couch in the executive lounge, watching Ryan Carter through half-closed eyes. Beyond him, rain streamed down the enormous windows, turning the city lights into blurred ribbons of gold and white. The storm had swallowed most of the skyline hours ago. Inside, emergency lights cast a dim glow across the empty office, and the only sounds were rain, distant thunder, and Ryan's quiet voice. His charcoal coat covered me like a blanket. I had not asked for it. When exhaustion finally caught me, I had fallen asleep without one. Ryan must have placed it over me afterward. The thought should not have mattered. Somehow it did. No, he said into the phone. Do not change anything yet. He stood near the glass with one hand in his pocket, his white dress shirt rolled to his elbows, and his tie gone. Without the tailored suit jacket and controlled expression he wore every day, he looked less like the alpha manager everyone at Whitmore Design Group quietly feared, and more like a man who had been awake far too long. Ryan was 29, 5 years older than me, and almost impossible to read. In 8 months working under him, I had never heard him raise his voice. I had never seen him lose control. Until tonight, I had barely seen him smile. Yet he remembered exactly how I drank my coffee. He knew about my almond allergy after hearing me mention it once. He noticed when I stayed late, when I skipped lunch, even when I changed something small in a design before anyone else saw it. I had spent months telling myself that was simply what good managers did. Now I was not so sure. Ryan listened to whoever was speaking on the other end. Then he glanced toward the couch. I closed my eyes immediately. My heart was beating so hard that pretending to sleep suddenly felt ridiculous. He still does not know, Ryan repeated, softer this time. A pause followed, and I wanted to stay that way until I can handle this properly. My stomach tightened. There were only two of us stranded on the floor. Whatever Ryan was discussing, he clearly did not want someone to know, and every instinct told me that someone was me. His footsteps crossed the carpet. They stopped beside the couch. I kept my breathing slow. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Ryan gently pulled the edge of his coat higher over my shoulder. The gesture was so careful that it confused me more than the phone call. Good night, Ethan, he murmured. His footsteps moved away again. I opened my eyes and stared at the dark ceiling, suddenly wide awake. 12 hours earlier, Ryan Carter had been nothing more than the alpha boss I could never understand and tried much too hard to avoid. I had no idea why he remembered every small detail about me. I had no idea what secret he was keeping. And I certainly had no idea that the answer had begun with 5 extra minutes at work. 12 hours earlier, Ryan Carter was still the man I had spent 8 months trying not to notice. At 2 in the afternoon, Whitmore Design Group looked exactly as it always did, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, keyboards clicking beneath quiet music, designers moving between desks with material samples and coffee cups. I was 24, an omega, and genuinely happy with my job. Interior design made sense to me. A room could feel wrong, but there was always a reason. Bad lighting, poor balance, too much empty space. People were harder. Ryan was hardest of all. He was standing inside the glass conference room when I walked toward the break room, wearing his usual charcoal suit and listening to a presentation with the focused expression that made junior employees rehearse their answers before speaking to him. I told myself not to look. Naturally, I looked. Ryan glanced through the glass at exactly the same moment. I immediately continued walking. The coffee machine became extremely interesting. I had just finished pouring my usual black coffee when the break room door opened. Leaving already, Miller? His voice came from behind me. I am getting coffee. You usually disappear when I enter. I turned. That is not true. Ryan raised one eyebrow. 8 months, Ethan. Hearing my first name surprised me almost as much as being confronted. Maybe you have terrible timing. Every day. Statistically possible. Something almost like amusement appeared in his gray eyes. He stepped toward the counter, leaving enough space between us that I never felt crowded. Then he reached into the cabinet and removed a small container of cinnamon. You forgot this. I stared at it. How did you know? You put cinnamon in your coffee every afternoon. You noticed that? Ryan looked at me as if the question itself confused him. I noticed things. He said it casually, but the words followed me back to my desk. The problem was that he really did notice things. During my first week, I had mentioned my almond allergy once at lunch. Months later, when a client brought almond pastries to a meeting, Ryan quietly moved the plate away from my seat before I even saw it. When I stayed late working on a hotel concept, I returned from the printer to find my desk lamp switched on after the cleaning crew dimmed the overhead lights. Ryan never claimed responsibility, but his office had been the only other one occupied. None of those moments meant anything by themselves. Together, they made avoiding him increasingly difficult. At 5:30, phones across the office began buzzing with weather alerts. A major storm was moving toward Chicago, and the sky beyond the windows had turned a deep slate gray. My coworker Maya pulled on her coat and stopped beside my desk. "You should leave now. I need 5 minutes." She looked at my screen. "Your 5 minutes always becomes an hour." "Not today. That sounds like something you will regret saying." I laughed and promised I would leave soon. By 6, the office had emptied until only the soft hum of ventilation remained. I found one formatting error in the Harrison proposal, fixed it, then discovered another. Rain began tapping against the windows. I checked the time and sighed. 6:12. I saved the document and reached for my bag. "You are still here." I turned. Ryan stood behind me with his coat folded over one arm. "So are you," I said. His eyes moved to my screen. "Problem. Nothing I cannot finish tomorrow." Ryan looked toward the darkening windows, then back at me. Instead of leaving, he placed his coat over the nearest chair and pulled another chair beside mine. "Show me." Ryan pulled his chair beside mine. Close enough to see the proposal, but far enough that I still had room to breathe. "Page 17, I said. The furniture schedule shifted when I updated the floor plan, and now the measurements do not match the client summary. Ryan studied the screen. "You caught that at 6:12 on a Friday? I have an unhealthy relationship with alignment. Finally, something about you I understand." I looked at him. Was that a joke? "Focus, Miller." There was the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth. We worked through the document together, checking dimensions, finishes, and presentation pages while the rain outside grew steadily louder. 5 minutes became 20, then 40. Ryan never acted impatient. He caught 2 errors I had missed and let me catch one of his without pretending it had been intentional. By 6:50, the proposal was finally clean. I leaned back and exhaled. "Done." "Done," Ryan agreed. My phone buzzed. The weather alert warned of flash flooding and major transit delays across downtown Chicago. "That looks encouraging," I said. Ryan checked his own phone. "How are you getting home?" "Train. Service is already being delayed. I live about 6 miles away. I can wait it out downstairs if I have to." His eyes lifted to mine. "Or you could have left 40 minutes ago. You are the one who offered to help." "Yes." "Why?" The question escaped before I could reconsider it. Ryan went still for half a second. "Because you were here alone." It was such a simple answer that I did not know what to do with it. I picked up my bag. "Then we should both leave before Maya gets the satisfaction of being right." We headed toward the elevators as thunder rolled beyond the windows. The office lights flickered once, recovered, then dimmed again. I pressed the call button. Nothing happened. Ryan tried the second panel. Still nothing. A moment later, the building's speakers chimed. A calm security announcement explained that the elevators had been temporarily taken out of service after an electrical fault and that employees should remain on their current floors until further notice. "Perfect," I murmured. Ryan called security directly. He listened for nearly a minute, asking short, practical questions. When he ended the call, his expression told me I was not going to like the answer. "Backup power is stable, but the elevators are staying offline until the building engineers clear them." Stairs. Security does not want anyone using the stairwells unless there is an evacuation. Water is coming into parts of the lower service level, and conditions outside are getting worse. As if the city wanted to prove his point, another weather alert appeared on my phone. Nearby train service had been suspended, and several streets around the building were temporarily closed because of flooding. I looked through the windows. Chicago had nearly vanished behind gray sheets of rain. "How long are we supposed to stay here?" "Security cannot say." Ryan glanced toward the dark office behind us. "Possibly several hours." "Possibly." He hesitated. "Until morning." I let out a disbelieving laugh. Maya is never going to let me forget this. The 5 minutes. She predicted an hour. Ryan removed his coat and placed it over the reception chair. Apparently, she lacked ambition. I laughed before I could stop myself. Ryan looked almost pleased by that. Then half the lights on our floor went dark, leaving the windows filled with storm clouds and reflected emergency lamps. I turned toward him. So what exactly do two people do in an empty office all night? Ryan loosened his tie, looked toward the break room, and answered with perfect seriousness. First, we determined whether anyone had the good judgment to leave food behind. The break room inventory suggested that our coworkers had excellent survival instincts and terrible snack discipline. Ryan opened one cabinet after another while I inspected the refrigerator, eventually producing 2 apples, a bag of microwave popcorn, crackers, several granola bars, and enough coffee to keep the entire floor awake until sunrise. We are saved, I said, holding up the popcorn. Your standards for rescue are surprisingly low. You clearly underestimate popcorn. Ryan picked up one of the granola bars, studied the label, and placed it back on the counter. Almonds. I stopped. You remembered. Yes. I mentioned that months ago, during your first week. The answer came so naturally that it left me staring at him. Ryan noticed and raised an eyebrow. What? Nothing. You are just proving my point. Which point? That you notice an unreasonable amount of information about me. Something changed in his expression, subtle enough that I almost missed it. Occupational habit. That sounded suspiciously rehearsed. Eat your apple, Miller. By 8:15, another section of the floor lost normal power, and the emergency lights came on automatically. We carried our collection of food to the executive lounge, where 2 leather couches faced the floor-to-ceiling windows. Chicago looked distant and unreal through the rain. Ryan disappeared into his office and returned without his suit jacket, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. Somehow, that tiny change made him seem less like my manager. He set 2 bottles of water on the coffee table and sat across from me. No coffee? I asked. You have had 3 cups today. You counted. I noticed things. You cannot keep using that answer. It remains accurate. I laughed, and to my surprise, Ryan did too. It was brief, but genuine. I had worked with him for 8 months and never heard that sound. You actually laugh? I said. Occasionally. Nobody at work is going to believe me. Then perhaps you should protect my reputation. Around 8:40, the remaining overhead lights flickered and went dark, leaving only emergency lighting and the pale glow of the storm beyond the windows. Ryan switched on a flashlight and placed it upright on the table between us. For a while, we ate popcorn and listened to the rain. Without ringing phones, meetings, or coworkers moving around us, the office felt like a completely different place. Can I ask you something? I said. You usually do. Why do you call everyone by their first name? Except me. Ryan leaned back. Do I? Maya is Maya. Christopher is Christopher. I am always Miller. He looked at me for a long moment. Maybe Miller feels safer. I forgot about the popcorn in my hand. Safer for who? Ryan looked toward the windows instead of answering. The silence stretched until I could hear the rain tracing paths down the glass. All right, I said. New rule. I am already concerned. No job titles after midnight. He checked his watch. It is not even 9. I am giving you time to adjust. That smile appeared again, warmer this time. Very considerate. I leaned back against the couch. Practice now. Ryan looked directly at me. The humor in his expression softened into something quieter. Ethan. My name sounded unexpectedly different without an office full of people around us. I swallowed and looked toward the windows. See? Not difficult. No, he said softly. That was never the difficult part. I turned back to him, but Ryan had already lowered his eyes to the flashlight between us, leaving me with the unsettling feeling that our conversation had stopped being about names. The question stayed between us long after Ryan stopped speaking. I wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his expression told me that pushing would make him retreat behind the professional wall I knew too well. So I reached for another handful of popcorn instead. Fine, I said. If names are dangerous territory, tell me something nobody at work knows about you. Ryan looked almost amused. That is a broad request. You manage million-dollar projects. I have confidence in your ability to narrow it down. He considered this while rain whispered against the windows. I cook. I stared at him. That is your secret? You asked for something nobody knows, not something scandalous. What do you cook? Chili. Pasta. Occasionally steak. I smiled. I imagined your refrigerator containing sparkling water, and one extremely expensive lemon. Ryan laughed, genuinely this time, and the sound changed his entire face. Why the lemon? Decoration. My kitchen is functional, Ethan. I will believe that when presented with evidence. His smile lingered for another second before fading. My father would consider cooking a waste of time. The shift in his voice was small, but unmistakable. Was he like you? I asked. Ryan looked toward the rain. He would say I am like him. That was not my question. His eyes returned to mine. No, not exactly. He rested his hands loosely together. My father believed an alpha should always be the strongest person in any room. Never uncertain. Never dependent. Never visibly affected by anything. That sounds exhausting. It was normal when I was growing up. Ryan paused. If I was upset, he told me to control it before anyone noticed. If I asked for help, he called it dependence. If I cared too much about someone, he called it distraction. The flashlight illuminated only half his face, but I could see how carefully he chose every word. Eventually, you stopped needing someone to remind you. Suddenly, all the things I had mistaken for coldness looked different. The measured voice, the unreadable expression, the way he always seemed perfectly composed. Maybe Ryan had not been born distant. Maybe distance was something he had practiced until nobody could see the effort anymore. Is that why you stay late so often? I asked. Partly. What is the other part? He hesitated longer this time. There is rarely a reason to hurry home. I stopped smiling. You live alone? Penthouse near the river. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen you would apparently find suspicious, and a view I barely notice anymore. That sounds lonely. Ryan looked down at his hands. Sometimes. One quiet word changed the room more than any confession could have. I had spent 8 months imagining his life as perfectly ordered and complete. I had never pictured him opening the door to an empty apartment night after night. For what it is worth, I said, I do not think needing people makes anyone weak. Ryan lifted his eyes. You say that like someone who works very hard not to need anyone. My chest tightened. We were talking about you. We were. He leaned back, leaving the same respectful distance between us. But you asked me for something nobody at work knows. And you told me. Yes. His gaze held mine, calm but no longer unreadable. Now I am wondering whether you will do the same. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the Chicago skyline. Inside, the alpha I had spent months avoiding waited without pressure, without another question, simply giving me the choice to answer. For reasons I could not yet explain, that made me want to. I could have changed the subject. Part of me wanted to. Talking about Ryan had felt unexpectedly easy because his past belonged to him. Talking about mine meant opening a door I had spent years learning how to keep closed. I looked toward the windows, where rain blurred Chicago into streaks of silver and gold. There was someone before I moved here, I said. Ryan remained silent. His name was Daniel. He was an alpha, and we were together for almost 2 years. I folded my hands together. At first, I thought he was protective. He always wanted to know where I was, whether I had eaten, who I was spending time with. It felt like attention. Then the questions became opinions, and the opinions became expectations. Ryan's expression grew serious, but he did not interrupt. He had opinions about my clothes, my friends, even the kind of design work I should pursue. When I was accepted into a program in Chicago, he told me I should turn it down because moving 6 hours away would be selfish. But you came, Ryan said quietly. Eventually. I gave a small smile. It took me longer than I am proud of to understand that love should not make your world smaller. Ryan looked at me for several seconds. I am glad you came. For simple words, spoken without drama, and somehow they reached deeper than reassurance should have. I lowered my eyes. That is part of why I avoid you. Daniel. Not exactly. I took a breath. You are an alpha. You are my manager. You notice everything, and you always seem completely certain of yourself. My instincts notice you before my common sense gets involved, and that makes me nervous. Ryan leaned forward slightly, then stopped himself. Is that why you always leave when I enter a room? I do not always leave. You abandoned an entire cup of coffee last Tuesday. I stared at him. You noticed that too? It was still warm. Despite myself, I laughed. Fine. Maybe I leave sometimes. 8 months, Ethan. You are keeping statistics now? Only memorable ones. The humor faded gently from his expression. What are you afraid will happen if you stay? The question landed harder than I expected. I looked at him. I might start wanting to. Ryan became completely still. The rain filled the silence between us. Wanting to what? He asked. Stay. Saying it aloud made my face warm, but I refused to look away. That is the problem. I noticed the coffee, the almond pastries, the desk lamp. I noticed that you ask everyone else whether their work is finished, but you ask me whether I need help finishing mine. And I started wondering why. Ryan stood, perhaps out of instinct, and my shoulders tightened before I could stop them. He saw it immediately. Instead of coming closer, he took one deliberate step backward. That single movement silenced every old alarm inside me. Then I need to make something clear, he said. You never owe me closeness because I am your manager. You never owe me trust because I am an alpha. Whatever you feel, you get to decide what it means. My throat tightened. Ryan, if being around me makes you uncomfortable, I will give you space. His voice remained calm. And I will not touch you unless you ask me to. He did not wait for gratitude. He did not ask whether I liked him. He simply moved farther away and sat in the chair across from me, leaving the choice exactly where he said it belonged. I watched him in the dim emergency light and understood something that frightened me for an entirely different reason. Daniel had taught me to associate closeness with losing control. Ryan had just shown me that someone could care enough to step back. And for the first time in 8 months, I was no longer wondering why I kept running from him. I was wondering what might happen if I finally stayed. For a while after that, neither of us tried to fill the silence. Strangely, it was the most comfortable silence I had ever shared with Ryan. He stayed in the chair across from me, exactly where he had chosen to sit after promising me space, and I remained on the couch, watching the storm soften beyond the windows. By 11:30, the rain had settled into a steady rhythm. Security still could not give us a safe departure time, so we stopped checking every few minutes. Instead, we talked, not about Daniel or Ryan's father, but about ordinary things that somehow felt just as revealing. My mother lived outside Milwaukee and called every Sunday morning whether I was awake or not. Ryan had an older sister in Seattle who sent him photographs of her golden retriever because she believed his life needed more joy. She sounds smart, I said. You have never met her. I already trust her judgment. Ryan smiled. You have become surprisingly comfortable insulting me. Maybe being trapped together accelerated the workplace friendship process. His expression shifted at the word friendship, but he let it pass. Sometime after midnight, exhaustion began winning. I stretched out on the leather couch, while Ryan remained near the windows. You should sleep too, I told him. Eventually. That means you are not going to. That means eventually. I smiled into the cushion. Good night, Ryan. There was a brief pause. Good night, Ethan. I do not remember falling asleep. When I woke again, the room was darker, and something warm covered my shoulders. Ryan's charcoal coat. I touched the fabric, confused, then heard his voice near the windows. No, do not change anything yet. I stayed still. The digital clock across the lounge read 2:13. Ryan stood with his phone against his ear, speaking quietly enough that I had to concentrate. I understand. Monday is fine. A pause followed. The transfer request was already approved. Send the final paperwork to Human Resources Monday morning, but keep it confidential until I speak with him. My sleepiness vanished. Transfer request. Human Resources. Him. My stomach tightened. Then Ryan said the words that made everything worse. He still does not know. He listened for several seconds. And I wanted to stay that way until I can handle this properly. Old fear moved faster than reason. Only hours earlier, I had told him exactly why powerful alphas made me cautious. I had admitted that I noticed. Him. That part of me wanted to stay when he entered a room. Now there was confidential paperwork involving some unnamed man, and every instinct insisted that man was me. Was Ryan transferring me because of what I had confessed? Had he decided I was a professional complication? Or had the transfer been planned before tonight for some reason I could not understand? His footsteps approached. I closed my eyes. They stopped beside the couch, and Ryan carefully pulled his coat higher over my shoulder. Good night, Ethan, he murmured. Then he walked toward the kitchen. I opened my eyes. The coat that had felt comforting now seemed to carry a question I could not ignore. I sat up slowly and looked across the empty lounge. This was the moment I had heard without context in the darkness, the secret that had turned one strange night into something far more complicated. For several minutes, I argued with myself. The old version of me would have stayed quiet, imagined the worst, and disappeared before anyone could make a decision for me. But Ryan had spent the night telling me that choice mattered. If I believed even half of what he had said, then I owed myself something better than running. I folded his coat carefully on the couch, stood, and followed the faint light toward the kitchen. Whatever Ryan Carter was planning, this time I was going to ask him directly. I found Ryan in the break room, standing beside the counter with a bottle of water in his hand. He looked up the moment I entered, and whatever he saw in my expression made him set it down. "Ethan," I stopped several feet away. "How long?" His brow tightened. "How long what? How long have you been planning to transfer me?" Silence followed. Not guilty silence. Surprise. Somehow that made my pulse beat faster. "You heard the call," he said. "Enough of it." I folded my arms, less from anger than from needing something steady. "You told me tonight that I would always have a choice, Ryan. Then I wake up and hear you discussing confidential transfer paperwork with human resources. You are right." That answer caught me completely off guard. "What?" "You are right to ask." His voice remained calm. "And I should have explained this before tonight." He did not approach me. He stayed exactly where he was. "The transfer is to Maya's division. I submitted the request weeks ago. It was approved yesterday, but it does not become effective until the Harrison project closes." I stared at him. "Why would you transfer me to another division?" Ryan looked down briefly, and for the first time since I had known him, he seemed genuinely uncertain about what to say. "Because I wanted to ask you for coffee." I blinked. "Coffee? Outside this building? Outside work? Not as your manager." The room suddenly felt very quiet. Ryan continued before I could respond. "I oversee your assignments. I contribute to your performance reviews. I can affect which projects you receive. As long as that is true, asking you for anything personal would put you in an unfair position." 8 months of memories began rearranging themselves. The cinnamon, the almond pastries, the desk lamp, the way he always seemed to notice when I entered a room while pretending not to. "How long?" I asked again. This time he understood. Ryan gave a quiet breath. "About 6 months." 6 months. Approximately. "You liked me for 6 months, and your solution was to call me Miller and look irritated every time I walked into your office." The corner of his mouth moved. In retrospect, the strategy had weaknesses. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Some of the fear inside my chest loosened. "Why did you not just tell me?" "Because wanting something does not automatically give me the right to pursue it." His answer erased the last of my laughter, but not the warmth behind it. "In New York?" I asked, remembering another fragment from the call. Ryan hesitated. "I was offered a promotion there." I declined it. "Because of me?" "Not entirely." He looked toward the rain-dark windows. "But knowing you made me question why I kept accepting the life other people expected me to want. Bigger title, bigger apartment, another city, more reasons to stay busy enough that I never had to ask whether I was happy." He met my eyes again. "You were part of the reason I finally asked." I took one step toward him. Ryan remained still. "You said you would not touch me unless I asked." I meant it. I took another step, close enough now to see the exhaustion beneath his calm expression. Then I held out my hand. "This is me asking." Ryan looked at my hand first, then at me, giving me one final opportunity to change my mind. Only when I kept my hand there did he gently take it. His fingers closed around mine without pulling me closer. Nothing outside changed. Rain still traced the windows. The elevators were still offline. The city was still waiting for morning. But something inside me finally became quiet. For years, I had thought feeling safe meant keeping enough distance that nobody could decide anything for me. Standing there with Ryan, I understood another possibility. Safety could also mean choosing to step closer and knowing the other person would still let you step away. By 6:30 in the morning, the storm had weakened to a soft rain, and Chicago slowly reappeared beyond the windows. Streetlights reflected across wet pavement 42 floors below. Traffic began moving again, and the buildings around us filled with warm squares of morning light. Ryan and I had spent the last few hours talking quietly, but neither of us tried to define what had happened between us. We did not need to. At 6:47, the overhead lights flickered on. A familiar mechanical hum returned throughout the floor, followed by an announcement from building security that elevator service had been restored and conditions outside were improving. I looked toward the hallway and felt something unexpected. For hours, I had wanted nothing more than a way out. Now that the doors were open again, leaving felt strangely difficult. Ryan noticed. Of course he did. You should go home and sleep, he said. That sounds like my manager talking. For a little longer, I still am. Reality returned with those words. Ryan continued. Until your transfer becomes effective, nothing changes professionally. No special treatment. No expectations. And after that? I asked. His expression softened. After that, you decide. We walked toward the elevators together. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and automatically moved. Toward the far corner. Ryan entered and stood on the opposite side. For 8 months, that distance had been normal. I looked at the empty space between us, then crossed it and stood beside him. Ryan glanced at me but said nothing. His quiet smile was enough. On Monday morning, Human Resources confirmed what he had told me. Ryan had started the transfer process weeks earlier, and I would move to Maya's division when the Harrison project officially closed that Friday. He had created the boundary before he knew whether I would ever return his feelings. That mattered to me more than any romantic speech could have. The rest of the week, Ryan kept every promise. At work, I was Miller again. He questioned my designs, corrected a budget error, and returned one presentation because I had used an outdated client logo. There were no secret favors and no private conversations disguised as meetings. Friday arrived, the Harrison project closed, and at 5:30 my transfer became official. I carried my notebook to my new desk across the floor. Ryan stayed in his office. He did not come looking for me. He did not send a message. He left the next choice to me. At 6, I walked into his office. He looked up from his laptop. Everything okay? You owe me breakfast. His eyebrows lifted. Breakfast? We survived on crackers, popcorn, and apples. I think breakfast is reasonable compensation. The smile I had first seen by flashlight appeared again. Tomorrow morning? 9. The next day, Ryan was waiting outside a small diner near the Chicago River. No charcoal suit. No office between us. No storm keeping us in the same place. He wore a dark blue sweater and held 2 coffee cups. He handed one to me. Black coffee with a little cinnamon. I looked at the cup, then at him. You remembered. Ryan smiled. I noticed things. Months later, those words would still make me smile. He noticed when I needed help, but also when I needed space. He noticed when silence was kinder than questions. Most importantly, he understood the difference between holding on to someone and giving them a reason to stay. That night, circumstances had kept us together. By morning, the doors were open again. This time, walking beside him was entirely my choice.